This is a tale woven from vigilance and betrayal, a pulse-pounding account of whispers in the dark and the resonant roar of dignity. Within the ancient laterite walls of the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, a silent war was waged. A conflict without massive gunshots, yet fraught with the utmost peril, where the true cost of loyalty was about to be laid bare under the stark African sky. This is the story of President Ibrahim Traoré, a leader whose burden was heavy, a man who trusted his instincts when the very air within Kuluba felt wrong, confirming his deepest fears about the ghosts lurking beneath the lamplight. It began subtly, but for Traoré, the unease was a sharp internal alarm he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a feeling. It was rooted in a specific disturbing observation days earlier. He was walking the polished laterite corridors near his private quarters, the air thick with the scent of shea butter polish and the distant, comforting rhythm of a balafon practice session drifting from outside the compound walls. Sounds of normal life contrasting sharply with the constant tension within. He passed one of the newly assigned guards, a young man named Sadou, meticulously polishing a gleaming brass railing. As Traoré approached, Sadou's eyes darted involuntarily towards a heavily secured access panel nearby. His hand, polishing, hesitated, hovering near a hidden seam, a flicker of intent crossing his face, a move quickly aborted, his hand returning to the cloth with exaggerated diligence as Traoré's gaze met his for just a fraction too long. It wasn't disrespect, it was calculation, a suppressed action. This was the seed, planted by a lifetime of observing intent, that sharpened Traoré's focus on the three newcomers. Their records were startlingly perfect, their backgrounds spotless, their blending seamless. They moved with crisp efficiency, salutes flawless, rarely speaking, following orders without hesitation. They wore the standard uniform, but something about their presence lacked the organic feel of the veteran guards, men whose worn leather boots and faded patches told stories Issouf and Mensa could read like a book. These new ones, they move like polished chrome in a dust storm, Corporal Mensa, Issouf remarked one quiet evening, watching Sadou and another, Karim, rotate positions with unnatural synchronization. Mensa, a man whose face was etched with the history of the compound, nodded, eyes narrowed. Aye, Issouf. Too perfect. Kuluba has its own pulse, its own patterns woven into these laterite walls. They don't feel it. They're outside the pattern. They were always present, always near, volunteering for the sensitive night shifts, their rotation positions unnervingly strategic around the president's private quarters. They memorized his schedule with unnatural speed, shadowed his movements with clinical precision, never making a mistake. To most, they were exemplary soldiers. To a vigilant few, steeped in the hard-won wisdom of survival, they were predators in plain sight, their perfect facade a camouflage woven tighter than any traditional kente cloth. President Ibrahim Traoré had lived through betrayal before. The ghost of past leaders' fatal mistakes, their blind spots, their misplaced trust, was a constant, heavy weight upon his shoulders. He had studied the history, the coups that came not with frontal assaults, but through insidious whispers, quiet dinners, firm handshakes masking daggers, and soft voices selling national souls for foreign coin. This knowledge was a lonely burden, a sentinel in his mind that often cost him sleep, fueling a vigilance that felt less like a duty and more like a deeply personal battle for the very soul of his nation against unseen manipulators. The most dangerous threat, he knew, always came from within, often guided by hands from without. And because of that aborted gesture near the panel, because of Sadou's eyes, Traoré was ready. Late one evening, Corporal Issouf's soldier's intuition culminated in action. He saw Sadou slip behind the generator room, a known blind spot. Minutes later, moving with the silence of years of practice, learned tracking wildlife in the bush before guarding men, Issouf followed. Tucked behind a metal pipe, his hand closed around a small black object, a sophisticated signal device, utterly out of place within the earthy, functional architecture of Kuluba. It felt cold, foreign. Without a moment's hesitation, Issouf reported to Commander Jamal. Jamal looked up, his usual composed demeanor barely masking the intense alertness in his eyes that had seen too much, too soon. "You saw it too, then," Jamal stated, not a question, acknowledging the shared, unspoken suspicion that had been growing between them like a weed in dry soil. "A device." Issouf nodded grimly. "Hidden." Jamal leaned back, the faint lines of stress around his mouth deepening. "It's time, Issouf. Time to confirm our fears." His voice dropped, hard as laterite rock. "Tighten the net, quietly. No one moves without us knowing." From that night on, the tension in the residence became a palpable low hum, like distant thunder building. New plainclothes officers, chosen for discretion and unwavering loyalty, their faces known only to Jamal and Traore, appeared, merging into the background. Security protocols were not just tightened, they were fundamentally altered, creating layers of unseen protection as intricate as a mossy tapestry. President Traore added a new ritual to his day, a careful personal check of his vehicle before every trip, his hands running over the metal, feeling for anything out of place. Orders were given in hushed, almost coded tones between trusted personnel, often accompanied by specific hand gestures or shared glances that spoke volumes. And the three suspicious soldiers, Sadhu, Idrissa, and Karim. They continued their duties, outwardly perfect. But now, every breath, every glance, every shift in weight was being recorded, analyzed by unseen eyes and ears. They were moving through a house that was turning into a cage, unaware the bars, forged from suspicion and vigilance, were already around them. Short, tense exchanges in the quiet hours, while loyalists monitored their every move, began to reveal the fault lines within their trio, like cracks in sun-baked earth. "Cold tonight?" Karim muttered, his voice flat, eyes scanning the empty corridor with chilling efficiency. Sadhu shivered, not from the temperature, but from an inner cold. "Almost over," he whispered back, his voice tight with a desperation born of impossible promises that felt increasingly fragile. "Think of back home. What waits?" Idrissa stood slightly apart, looking troubled, his fingers tracing a traditional geometric pattern carved into the laterite wall near his post. It has to work," he said, his usual calm facade strained. "No other way to fix things. The suffering—" Karim gave a low, humorless chuckle, devoid of warmth. "It will work. They promised, and they always deliver, for those who serve them well, unlike some here." His gaze flicked towards the presidential quarters. Idrissa just looked away, a flicker of doubt crossing his face, the weight of promises feeling increasingly heavy. Then came the final, damning confirmation, a classified intelligence report, the result of relentless surveillance and intercepted communications. The voices were disguised, but for many familiar with the region's hidden conflicts, they confirmed a long-held, unsettling suspicion about the specific power orchestrating instability. The content, however, was brutally precise. The plan was to strike soon during a scheduled routine blackout test meant to simulate a power failure. 40 seconds of darkness, just long enough for power to cut out across the entire residence, just long enough, the report confirmed, for someone to fire a bullet in the dark. It spoke of eliminating the captain discreetly, a chilling echo of history, a direct contemptuous reference to another Sankara, implying African leaders who stood tall were merely obstacles to be removed. A cold, cultured voice with a distinct French accent added, "Do not fail. Once Traore is gone, Our arrangements will resume, and your families will be secured. Ensure there is no messy resistance. The silence in the room where Traore and Jamal received this was heavy, not with shock at foreign involvement itself, which was long suspected, but at the brazenness, the specificity, the utter contempt for Burkinabe sovereignty and human life it revealed. Traore closed the file, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a quiet fury. This wasn't just a plot by individuals. It was the precise unmasking of a specific foreign-backed operation, treating his nation as a pawn. And now, the final seconds were ticking down. President Traoré didn't hesitate. He personally changed the time of the blackout test, a seemingly small administrative detail signed with a firm hand. But he didn't inform the plotters. Instead, he gathered Jamal and his most trusted few. The house was already a cage. Now they would turn it into a trap, camouflaged by the routine rhythms of the palace. A small elite team of undercover operatives, men and women whose faces blended into the background, electricians, janitors, kitchen staff, all soldiers, all armed, their loyalty as strong as the oldest baobab tree, were woven into the building's fabric, their presence a secret from all but a handful. The three men still had no idea the ground beneath them had shifted, that the house they thought they were infiltrating had become their tomb, sealed not by stone, but by truth and vigilance. It happened at exactly 2:17 a.m., the time Traoré had personally set. The presidential residence was quiet, the air thick with anticipation, the normal night sounds of the city muted. Outside, the outer security team had been deliberately thinned, a calculated risk designed to give the plotters false confidence. Inside, a few lights flickered, radios crackled softly, sounds of a building settling, masking the coiled tension of the loyalists positioned in the shadows, waiting. Sadhu stood near the east corridor by the power box. Karim was positioned by the back hallway leading to the president's office. Idrissa had secured the central hall. All three were in place. Then the lights went out. Total, absolute blackout. In the sudden, disorienting darkness, Traoré stood utterly still in his location, listening. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat. But his breath was controlled, shallow, every muscle tensed. The sounds of the building were magnified, soft footfalls, distant creaks, the rasp of fabric. He was a part of the trap, the bait in the center of the web. Sadhu moved first, pulling his suppressed pistol, heading instantly for the generator panel to kill the emergency lights, his path practiced, confident. Karim drew his weapon, a silent shadow moving with lethal intent towards the president's office door, his focus absolute. But Idrissa hesitated. In the split second of total darkness, just as he reached for his signal jammer, his foot scuffed against something metallic placed deliberately on the floor. A tool left precisely there by a janitor. A sound that shouldn't have been there, a detail utterly outside their expected, sterile environment. That minute sound in the amplified darkness, coupled with a faint, misplaced scent of local tobacco, sparked a terrifying, lightning-fast realization. This wasn't their planned blackout. This was wrong. He was walking into a trap. His hand fumbled, not activating the jammer fully to cover the assassination, but perhaps desperately altering its frequency. A split-second decision, born of terror and the chilling confirmation of his earlier doubts. They were expendable pawns, not partners. He cursed under his breath, a sharp, panicked sound swallowed by the dark. Before Sadhu could reach the generator panel, a figure emerged from the deeper shadows, a janitor who moved with the precision of a predator. A swift, brutal tackle, the clang of metal as the pistol was wrestled away. Idrissa, fumbling with the device and his conflicting fear, was met by another shadow, a Tojian, appearing as if from the laterite wall itself. A sharp, disabling blow from a stun baton he dropped with a grunt, the jammer clattering uselessly away. Karim, closer to his target, heard the commotion behind him, a sudden jolt of adrenaline turning his silent stalk into a desperate sprint towards the office door. He reached it, weapon raised. And in that microsecond, just as his finger tightened on the trigger, he made a frantic, unexpected movement towards a hidden pocket in his uniform, attempting to grab something else. And the lights snapped back on. President Traoré stood just inside the doorway, calm, still, the light illuminating the scene like a spotlight. Behind him, 2 elite guards, weapons raised, unwavering. Karim froze, weapon aimed at the now brightly lit doorway, his hand arrested mid-movement towards the hidden pocket. "Do it," Traoré said, his voice low, cutting through the silence, a challenge, a final test that held the weight of history. Karim stared, saw the trap sprung, saw the absolute control in Traoré's eyes, saw the loyalists already closing in, and his will evaporated. His weapon clattered to the floor. They were taken swiftly, restrained, searched, radios seized. No longer suspects, they were traitors, caught red-handed in a net woven by their own handlers' overconfidence and Traoré's vigilance. The shock rippled through the loyal guards who now appeared from their posts, men they'd shared meals with, trained beside, their faces a mix of disbelief and hurt. A young sergeant stared at Sadu, whispering, "Why?" The real, gut-wrenching truth came in the interrogation rooms, starkly lit, interviews recorded for the historical record. Sadu broke down quickly, his initial defiance crumbling under the weight of failure and the simple question from Jamal. "Why, Sadu? For what reason would you betray your country?" Tears streamed down his face, etched with despair and the exploited love for his family. "They promised to get my mother out," he choked out, his voice thick with anguish. "Safe passage. Money. They said once Traoré was gone, France would protect us. A new life." It was a desperation born of a son's love, twisted into a weapon by unseen hands. Karim was colder, more defiant. His motive a mix of transactional greed and a cynical belief that loyalty was a currency to be traded to the highest bidder. "We were on the winning side," he sneered once, quickly silenced by Jamal's hard gaze. But Idrissa was different. His initial fear gave way to a bitter resignation, his voice raw with disillusionment. He confessed, but his why was layered, revealing the insidious nature of the manipulation. He hadn't been seeking just personal gain or family safety. They promised to solve the crisis in the north," Idrissa admitted, his voice hoarse, his eyes distant, remembering the foreign recruiter's persuasive words. "To bring stability, resources they controlled, said Traoré's way was too slow, too defiant, that only they could fix it, restore what was lost." It was a twisted patriotism, a genuine desire for his country's well-being exploited by a foreign power, claiming to be a savior while planning murder. His moment of hesitation, his fumbling with the jammer in the darkness. "I heard something," he whispered. "Saw something wrong. A tool. Left there. Realized we aren't partners. We're just tools. Expendable." His attempt to alter the jammer's frequency was a desperate, futile act of rebellion, not against Traoré, but against the foreign handlers who had lied to him, sending him into a fatal trap. The search of Karim revealed another layer of the plot. A micro-communicator hidden in his uniform lining, meant for sending a Plan A failed signal to an external extraction cleanup team waiting nearby. This wasn't just simple betrayal, it was a complex web of manipulation, fear, greed, twisted idealism, and layered foreign planning, confirming for Traoré and Jamal the depth of the infiltration and the ruthlessness of the foreign power involved. A power that saw Burkina Faso not as a sovereign nation, but a chessboard. By sunrise, the news had not yet broken to the public, but within the compound, the air crackled with suppressed energy. An assassination attempt, foiled. The atmosphere was heavy, but also charged with a fierce, renewed loyalty among the trusted circle. President Traoré gathered his team. The intelligence report, the confessions, including Sadou's exploited love, Karim's cynicism, Idrissa's manipulated hopes, his moment of realization, and the discovery of Karim's secondary device, confirmed the precise nature of the threat and its external puppeteers. A quiet official statement was released. An internal security threat has been neutralized. The president is safe. Investigations are ongoing. But the whispers in Ouagadougou grew louder, fueled by fragmentation and deep-seated suspicions about foreign fingerprints. Then came the expected, almost performative denial from Paris. France strongly denies any involvement. Such accusations are dangerous and unfounded. To the outside world, a diplomatic statement. To Burkina Faso, armed with the truth, it was confirmation of the type of power at play. The Burkinabe people knew this play. Leaders who chose sovereignty became targets, met not with open war, but with soft invasions, false friends claiming solutions, and invisible chains of debt and dependence. Traoré met with his military council, his voice steady, carrying the weight of steel and conviction, the hard lessons of the past few days etched in his face. They tried to end me with silence, he stated, the details of the plot and the complex motivations now clear, adding a new layer of understanding to the age-old struggle. Now we will speak the truth with thunder. Preparations began, not for retaliation abroad, but for a powerful public declaration of sovereignty and a clear message to the world about the reality of foreign interference. The streets of Ouagadougou buzzed, radios crackled with rumor, social media blazed with half-truths and growing certainty. Yet President Ibrahim Traoré remained silent in public for a few more days, focusing inward, meeting with elders whose wisdom was the bedrock of the nation, students who were its future, soldiers who were its shield. He listened, seeking the nation's pulse, reinforcing unity, asking the same question, letting its weight sink in. "Who are we?" he would ask, his gaze earnest. "If we let others choose our future." Then, without warning, Traoré called a national address. No polished studio, no teleprompter, just a simple wooden table, the national flag, vibrant green, red, and yellow, behind him, his uniform slightly dusty from a recent visit to a rural base, a symbol of his connection to the land and its people. The cameras went live. His voice was calm, but every word struck like a drum beat, resonating with history, courage, and the collective memory of manipulation. "My people," he began, his eyes unwavering, looking directly into the camera, addressing every village, every family. "There was an attempt to take my life. It did not come from those who openly hate Burkina Faso. It came from those who pretend to love it." He paused, the truth landing heavily, confirming the suspicion many had carried, adding chilling details. 3 men in uniform, our own. They were used like tools. He didn't just say they were promised money or protection. He spoke of Sadou's exploited desperation, Idrissa's twisted idealism for national salvation warped into betrayal, Karim's cold calculation, and the foreign promises that sought to turn Burkinabe against Burkinabe by claiming they alone held the answers to the nation's problems, if only a defiant leader was removed. "Here is the evidence," he stated, lifting papers, copies of the report, images of the confiscated devices, snippets of the recordings. These recordings, these confessions, they speak of support, of foreign voices, of promises whispered in the language of those who once enslaved this continent, promising to fix our problems if only we would submit, if only we would eliminate a leader who stands for our right to choose. Then his voice deepened, firm and resolute, echoing the defiant spirit woven into the fabric of Burkinabe identity. But let this be clear. Burkina Faso bows to no foreign power, not in 1960, not in 2025, not ever. He laid bare the mechanics of the plot, the chilling reference to Sankara, the calculated use of a blackout, the specific foreign accent on the recordings, the layered planning including secondary communication methods, concrete, undeniable details that solidified the narrative for his people and broadcast it to the world. "We are not anti-French," he declared, clarifying the struggle. "We are not anti-West. We are pro-Africa for Africa. And if that threatens those who feed on our minerals and blood, then so be it. We are not here to be liked. We are here to be free." It wasn't just a speech. It was an unburdening, a collective roar of truth that transformed the crisis into a foundational moment for a new era of self-determination. Within hours, crowds gathered in every town square, waving flags, singing revolutionary songs with a new intensity. Women wept openly, men stood silent, fists raised in solidarity and defiance. Across the continent, leaders watched, many inspired by the explicit defiance and the courage to name the external forces at play. Burkina Faso had not just survived. It had turned the lens back, exposing the invisible war for all to see. The traitors would face justice publicly, their trials broadcast, becoming a harsh but necessary lesson for the nation. The courtroom, packed with ordinary citizens, became a classroom of history. Sadou's tearful confession of being fooled, Idrissa's somber explanation of his manipulated hopes and dawning horror at being used, Karim's cold, unapologetic stance. These were not just testimonies of guilt, but raw human illustrations of how foreign powers sought to divide and conquer, exploiting genuine grievances and personal vulnerabilities with tailored promises. The evidence, including the chilling recordings and the retrieved devices, was made undeniably public, a shield forged from truth to protect against future lies. The sentences were firm but fair, serving justice while emphasizing the national wound. Later that evening, Traoré stood on a dusty football field, surrounded by his people, the lines between leader and citizen blurred. His voice, steady, carried the weight of recent events, but also the fierce, clear-eyed resolve of truth revealed. "They offered us chains painted gold," he said, the plotters' stories a stark reminder of the temptation. "We refused. They sent money, spies, promises, tailored to our fears and our hopes. We answered with unity. They tried to break us with silence. We spoke with truth, the truth of their lies and our strength." He looked out at the faces, young and old, the inheritors of this struggle illuminated by the setting sun. "Dignity has a price, and we have paid it in blood and vigilance. But now we own it, not just for ourselves, but for every African child who refuses to be owned again." The crowd erupted, not in wild cheers, but in a thunderous, unified chant that shook the air. Burkina Faso. Dignity. Freedom. Across the world, embassies shifted uncomfortably, some scrambling to manage the fallout, others watching with grudging respect. And somewhere in Paris, someone finally realized the boy they once called weak had not just survived an assassination attempt. By exposing the shadows and bringing the truth, with all its complex layers and human cost, into the stark light of day, he had become the storm that would truly change the tide, not just for his nation, but for a continent yearning for its own voice.